future, we don't really know. So certainly with our existing, we're going to run, I'm sure we're going to run into increasing electrical shortages. We're going to need all the electricity we've got just to run our air conditioners, and there isn't going to be anything to spare for desalinization. That's the end of the line somewhere, so I wouldn't be too optimistic about this. Yes, Bill?
Before 1859, we didn't know about this treasure chest.
That's right. No.
Now, you told us about a lot of things, but you haven't told us about the treasure chest in the basement that nobody's found.
That's right. Well, of course I haven't, because no.
Something maybe discovered
That's right.
25 years
They will.
I
I sure hope so. You see, that's why I say you don't have to believe this. On the other hand, how likely are we to be lucky twice in a row? It's not all that practical, or at least it takes about 100 square miles of forest to feed it, so it'd be expensive. And there wouldn't be much of it. Now, on the other hand, if we'd had coal but no oil, we'd have had electricity, we'd have had radio, and I'm sure we'd have had television. I'd be a little surprised if we had the airplane. We certainly wouldn't have had the automobile. We wouldn't have had the suburbs. We wouldn't have had exurbia. We'd be living in slums. We'd be using streetcars, electric streetcars. The world would look very much like Liverpool did in 1890. Before I was born, actually, I came along a little later than that. I grew up in the modern world. I mean, I grew up with automobiles and electric light and radios and movies and all that. I haven't seen much technical change, you know, compared to my grandfather. Mr. Toffler's out of his mind. I mean, we're not suffering from future shock. We're suffering from present slowdown. And there hasn't been any major change in the American home now for 20 years, you know. And that's an extraordinarily stable kind of stagnant society in a sense, and technologically, and that but it's interesting to speculate this, because what the world would have looked like if there hadn't been any oil and gas, maybe what the world will look like in 2100. You see, after it's gone. Yes.
When we have 25% of the labor force back to the agriculture, what do you speculate makes middle class society?
Yes.
The rest of society.
Right.
You know, they have vast shrinking of middle class society.
That's
Spreading back upward.
That's worrying, isn't it? You see, the automobile is a great equalizer. The automobile has created a society of 90% knights. Because an automobile, you see, is a suit of armor with 200 horses inside, big enough to make love in, and that's why it's very popular. And if we go to public transportation, if we go to streetcars and carriages, this means going back to aristocracy. Middle class then become poor, don't they? You see, it's only peasants who ride public transportation. Don't forget that. And it's the knights who will ride in the remaining automobiles, or the horses and carriages, whatever they are, or the electric automobiles, if they're electric automobiles, because they're going to be very expensive. Not for everybody, you see. This is very worrying. I'm very worried about this because, you see, we have, in this country, we have no skills whatever in redistribution. No political skills. There's been no redistribution, no proportionate redistribution of income in this country since Calvin Coolidge. He was the last president who helped the poor. And that social democracy is how you subsidize the rich in the name of subsidizing the poor. That's what the Democratic Party stands for. And that as far as I can see, you see, there's been no redistribution in this country. We've all got twice as rich. You see, the poor have got twice as rich, and the middle class has got twice as rich, and the rich have got twice as rich in the last 30 years. That's how we managed to halve the amount of poverty, just by the poor, just by everybody getting twice as rich, which was nice. But then if we aren't going to get any richer, then the only way to diminish poverty is by real redistributions. And in a democratic society, this is surprisingly difficult, as Mr. McGovern discovered. And everybody is under an illusion that he's above the median, so that he'll be redistributed away from. You see, that is, and that we just haven't really legitimated redistribution in this country very much. No country has, actually. I mean, that is except maybe China. That at, I think, a very high social cost, really. You see, but even the Russians, outside of the distribution of income in the socialist countries, outside about the top 1,000, is almost the same as it is in the capitalist countries. You see, so there's extraordinary. It's extremely hard to redistribute. Equality is extraordinarily unstable. That is, there seems to be a kind of quasi-equilibrium of inequality, which is puzzling. And it's complicated. It's got something to do with inheritance, and it's got something to do with political illusions and things, but it's very difficult. And I worry about this very much because it could easily, you see, it is the burdens of shrinking. See, it's all very well to talk about no growth and that, which we may get without whether we want it or not. You see, it is, but the burden of this is all too likely to fall on the bottom 50%. You see, it is because as the SDS made a very great discovery in the 60s, they discovered that the powerful have power. And having discovered that, they proceeded to disintegrate, because after you've discovered that, there's nothing else you can do. You see, it becomes absolutely worthless. I mean, it is, and that there's a deplorable amount of truth in this. And the powerful tend to retain power, really. You see, it is all revolutions are palace revolutions, really. I mean, that was certainly true of the Russian Revolution. It's a revolution within the upper class. You see, it is, and that no revolution can produce a classless society, because it's a form of internal conquest. And I think this will turn out to be true in China, I suspect, in spite of the Cultural Revolution and all that. You see, it is just because there are certain stabilities in society that are extraordinarily hard to overcome, however deplorable this may be. I think it is rather deplorable. Yes.
Your concept of ecological sustainability,
Yeah.
Is interesting.
Yeah.
If you view this as some sort of an application of orderliness to ideas, organization
Yeah.
of information,
Yeah.
how do you view what might be considered a counter force to that? Would you call it mythological evolution?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. We could expand a little more.
Your remarks about the role of the noosphere
Yes, right.
and the counter forces which
That's
might
right.
be considered
That's right.
orderliness of ideas
Yes, that's right.
versus
That's right.
unorderly.
That's right, yeah. Well, knowledge recreates potential. I think that's true. But then there are limits to that of some sort, you see, which we really don't understand. As we cannot say where the limits to human knowledge lie, obviously, because we're a long way from it still. On the other hand, we can't deny that they must exist. You see, it is that the capacity of the human nervous system is very large, but it's not infinite. And that hence there must be limits to human knowledge. Now, it may be before we reach these, we will have produced our evolutionary successor. I don't know. I sometimes have a creepy feeling that the function of the human race is to make the transition from liquid intelligence to solid. And that'll be the end of us, you see. I mean, a very creepy thought, really. And if we produce our evolutionary successor, I won't like him. Because I do have a lot of race prejudice about the human race. On the other hand, you see, we do have to face the fact that no system is ultimately sustainable. I mean, that is I don't know what biologists here, I'm sure, know what the average length of life of a species is, but I think over the evolutionary story, it's certainly the order of 10 million years. It's quite small. You see, the human race has only been going for 500,000 or whatever it is, or however far you put it back, you see. It's so that if it's 10 million years, then we've got a long time to go, you see. Yeah, it is. But on the other hand, we speed things up a lot, and the social evolution is faster than biological evolution, so it could very well be that the human race only has a few thousand years to go. I don't know. I mean, that is maybe only a few hundred. I don't know. I mean, that is. But on the other hand, the process of evolution might survive our extinction. You see, particularly if we do produce self-reproducing solid-state Turing machines. You see, which is not quite absurd, you see. That's the trouble.
Let's have one more question.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yes, from the middle here. Could a planned economy cope with these disasters better if it had a better feedback system? Well, it depends what its feedback system is, isn't it? You see, it is, I wouldn't say there's a, I wouldn't say there's a non-existence theorem about the successful operation of a planned economy. On the other hand, as you know, I do think it is highly likely to have very poor feedback. And that the thing I'm looking for, of course, is something which is much more complex than a planned economy. You see, it is you see the analogy from biological evolution. That is, an individual is a planned economy. You and I are planned economies. We're planned by our fertilized egg. On the other hand, the ecosystem is not. You see, that is, life did not produce only one thing. You see, as it produced a competitive system. You see, it is that ecology is capitalism, isn't it? You see, it is, and on the whole, you see, the biological system is socialist in the individual and capitalist in the society, you might say. Well, now, I don't want to push that too far. Obviously, one can draw absurd analogies, but on the other hand, it isn't quite an absurd analogy. You see, it is because the large-scale organization do suffer from diseconomies of scale, which are hard to overcome. And this is the trouble with planned economies, you see, that they are dinosaurs. It wouldn't be so bad if they were mice or human beings, you see, but they are dinosaurs. And that the larger the organization, the harder it is to organize it successfully. Now, this isn't to say, I don't say it's impossible. I would say with existing organizational techniques, the Soviet Union is really almost as absurd as General Motors. You see, in fact, the Soviet Union is just General Motors writ large, isn't it? You see, that's what a planned economy is. A planned economy is a one firm state. If General Motors took over the whole American economy, we'd have something like the Soviet Union. The ideology might be different, but the structure would be the same. You see, an ideology doesn't make much difference, really, because, as you know, structure determines people's behavior much more than ideology does. So, as I say, I'm very skeptical about planned economies, except on a very small scale. You see, as I think small countries have a better chance of getting away with it than large ones, really. On the whole, this is true, that with the exception of China, which is an exception to all rules, simply because it's on the moon. You know, it belongs to another stream of human history. I mean, it's the second stream, really, and so it is very hard to generalize from China. But I would say outside of China, in the socialist world, by and large, the smaller socialist countries do better than the big ones when it comes to feedback and sensitivity and planning and this sort of. I mean, the only socialist country I'd want to live in, I think, would be Yugoslavia. You see, it is which has a lot of capitalist roaders. You see, it is in which it does to some extent rely on decentralization and the market and all that, you see, and even a kind of very rudimentary capital market. So, as you see, there's an enormous amount to be said for the market. The thing is, you see, if you make everything public, you have to agree or you have to be bullied. The great virtue of capitalism is you don't have to agree. You see, the great virtue of the market is that disagreement actually is good for everybody. Whereas in a planned economy, disagreement is impossible. So this is why I think planned economies almost inevitably lead to tyranny, as historically they have. You see, it may be relatively benign tyranny, but it's tyranny nonetheless, in the sense that it's an exercise of arbitrary power, and that I don't really see how any planned economy can avoid alienation of the individual on a scale which makes capitalist alienation look like a Sunday school picnic. You see, now one has to think about these things, really, you see, and really the socialists haven't thought about them very much. I think one of the distressing things about the last 100 years has been the sterility of socialist thought, and the fact that really they become kind of fundamentalist, you see, it is, and not really creative in their political thinking. With the possible exception of China, which I say is an exception to every rule. And I would say that China is about as Marxist-Leninist as the United States is Christian.
Before we adjourn, I would like to say there's going to be a social period outside the door to the right, and you all get a chance to visit with Dr. Boulding for a little bit. It's obvious, Dr. Boulding, from the interest here that you raised a lot of good questions. Your lecture is not only the first of our series, but I'm sure the best in our series of lectures for the World Food Institute. Thank you very much.